Timothy Simpson's world explodes in chaos as his genetic material splatters across an alien face. The Yadaran diplomat, Tina, recoils in shock, her violet eyes widening as she shrieks, "You got breeding material all over my face, human!" The grand hall of the Yadaran High Council falls silent. Hundreds of elongated alien heads turn towards the commotion. Timothy stands frozen, the shattered container still in his hands, its contents dripping onto the polished obsidian floor. Alarms blare, red lights flash. Yadaran security forces swarm towards Timothy, their tentacle-like appendages reaching for weapons. Earth's ambassador, a stoic woman named Helena, steps forward, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "It was an accident," she calls out, her voice steady despite the tension. Human genetic material poses no threat to Yadarans. The Yadaran High Counselor, a towering figure with iridescent skin, rises from his seat. "Quarantine them both," he commands, his voice booming through the chamber. "This is a potential biohazard and a grave cultural offense." Timothy's heart races as he's surrounded by alien guards. He locks eyes with Tina, who's being ushered away by medical personnel. To his surprise, he sees curiosity mixed with her shock. As Timothy is led towards a containment area, he overhears snippets of urgent conversation. Yadaran scientists huddle around displays, gesticulating with their multiple limbs. Words like DNA compatibility and evolutionary implications float through the air. The quarantine chamber is a stark white room. Through a transparent barrier, Timothy watches as Yadaran scientists swarm around Tina, taking samples and running scans. Her expression shifts from fear to fascination as she peppers the scientist with questions. Hours pass. The door to Timothy's chamber slides open, revealing Helena and the Yadaran High Counselor. Their faces are grim. "Mr. Simpson," Helena begins, her voice taut. "Preliminary scans show unexpected similarities between human and Yadaran DNA. The Yadaran High Council is demanding further study of both you and Tina." The High Counselor's multifaceted eyes fix on Timothy. "This incident may have exposed a connection between our species that predates our official first contact. We must understand the implications." Timothy's mind reels. The weight of this accidental discovery settles on his shoulders. He realizes that his clumsy stumble may have just altered the course of interstellar relations. As if on cue, a commotion erupts outside. Through the chamber's window, Timothy sees a swarm of alien journalists from various species, their recording devices trained on the facility. News of the incident has spread. Helena's communicator chirps. Her face pales as she reads the message. "Earth Command is receiving demands from a dozen alien races. They all want access to human genetic samples now." Timothy slumps against the wall, the magnitude of the situation crushing down on him. His diplomatic mission, meant to be a simple cultural exchange, has spiraled into a galactic crisis. And at the center of it all is Tina, the alien whose face he accidentally defiled, now potentially the key to unlocking the secret history of their species. As Timothy contemplates the chaos he's unleashed, he can't help but feel a twinge of something else, an inexplicable pull towards Tina. Their eyes meet across the facility, and in that moment, he knows their accidental encounter is just the beginning of a journey that will reshape the galaxy. Timothy's gaze lingered on Tina across the facility, their shared glance a silent acknowledgement of the storm they'd unwittingly unleashed. Before he could process the implications further, a team of Yadaran medical staff swept into his chamber, their tentacle-like appendages brandishing an array of unfamiliar instruments. "Mr. Simpson, we need to run some tests," one of the staff members announced, his multifaceted eyes glinting under the harsh lights. Timothy nodded, resigned to his fate. As the medical team began their examination, he caught glimpses of similar activity in Tina's chamber. The Yadaran diplomat seemed equally overwhelmed, her violet eyes wide as she submitted to the barrage of tests. Hours blurred into days. Timothy lost track of time in the sterile confines of his quarantine chamber, his world shrinking to a routine of examinations, sample collections, and terse conversations with the medical staff. Through it all, his thoughts continually drifted to Tina. On what Timothy estimated to be the third day, the door to his chamber hissed open. To his surprise, Tina was ushered in, accompanied by a stern-looking Yadarin who introduced himself as Dr. Zrix. "We've decided to place you together for closer observation," Dr. Zrix explained, his tone clipped and professional. "Our preliminary findings suggest a need for more intimate study." As the door sealed behind them, Timothy and Tina stood in awkward silence, the weight of their shared predicament hanging heavy between them. Tina's gaze met his, a mix of curiosity and apprehension in her violet eyes. "So," Timothy began, breaking the tension, "I guess we're roommates now." Tina's mouth quirked in what he assumed was a Yadarin smile. "It seems so human, though I must admit this is not how I imagined my diplomatic mission would unfold." As days passed in their shared confinement, Timothy and Tina found themselves drawn to each other. They spent hours discussing their respective cultures, sharing stories of their homes, and speculating about the implications of their genetic compatibility. Timothy found himself captivated by Tina's quick wit and insatiable curiosity about human culture. One evening, as they sat side by side on the edge of Timothy's bed, Tina suddenly gasped. Timothy turned to her, alarmed, only to find her staring at her hands in wonder. A faint blue luminescence pulsed beneath her iridescent skin. "Timothy," she breathed, her voice a mix of awe and fear. "What's happening to me?" Before he could respond, Dr. Zrix burst into the chamber, flanked by a team of researchers. They swarmed around Tina, scanners whirring as they examined her glowing skin. "Fascinating," Dr. Zrix muttered, his eyes fixed on a datapad. "It appears the human genetic material is inducing some sort of bioluminescent response in Yadarin physiology." As the days wore on, Tina's transformation became more pronounced. The blue glow intensified, and she reported feeling stronger, more energetic. Timothy watched in amazement as she effortlessly lifted a heavy piece of medical equipment that had previously required 2 Yadarin staff members to move. Their forced proximity and shared experience fostered an intimacy neither had anticipated. Timothy found himself drawn to Tina's newly enhanced form, her luminescent skin casting a soft blue glow in the dimness of their chamber at night. Despite their alien physiologies, there was an undeniable attraction building between them. One night, as they lay in their separate beds, Tina's voice cut through the darkness. "Timothy," she whispered, "I feel different, not just physically. There's something else." Timothy rolled to face her, his heart racing. "I feel it too," he admitted. In the soft blue light emanating from Tina's skin, they moved towards each other. Their lips met in a cautious, exploratory kiss. The contact sent a jolt through Timothy, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. They pulled apart, breathless and wide-eyed. "We should be careful," Tina murmured, her violet eyes searching his face. "We don't know what further genetic exchange might do." Timothy nodded, but couldn't bring himself to move away. They spent the night in each other's arms, careful to avoid any exchange of bodily fluids. Their embrace a silent testament to their growing bond. Their moment of connection was shattered the next morning by the arrival of a new figure, Commander John Hayes, an imposing human military officer with a determined eyes and a heart made in fierce dedication. "Mr. Simpson," Hayes barked, his voice filling the chamber, "I'm here to ensure your rights and Earth's interests are protected. This situation has escalated beyond a simple diplomatic incident." As Hayes argued with Dr. Zrix over the extent of the experiments, Timothy and Tina exchanged worried glances. Their private world had been invaded, and the wider implications of their situation came crashing down upon them. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and panicked shouts echoed from the corridors outside. Timothy instinctively pulled Tina close, his body tensing for whatever threat was approaching. The door to their chamber burst open, revealing a group of Yadarins wielding makeshift weapons. At their head stood a female Yadarin with fire in her eyes. "Death to the human contaminant!" she screamed, pointing at Timothy. "We will not allow our species to be polluted." As chaos erupted around them, Timothy and Tina found themselves at the center of a storm that threatened to engulf not just them, but potentially the entire galaxy. With the facility under attack and their future uncertain, they clung to each other, their unexpected bond their only anchor in the madness. The radical Yadarin's battle cry echoed through the chamber as chaos erupted. Timothy instinctively pulled Tina closer, his heart pounding as he assessed their dire situation. The female Yadarin leader's eyes blazed with fanatical fury as she advanced, her makeshift weapon raised menacingly. Commander Hayes sprang into action, his military training kicking in. "Everyone, stay back!" he barked, positioning himself between the intruders and the others. Dr. Zrix's tentacles frantically danced across a nearby console, initiating emergency protocols. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. The facility's power grid had been damaged in the attack. As backup generators hummed to life, Timothy noticed the temperature in the chamber rising rapidly. Sweat beaded on his forehead as the heat intensified. "The environmental controls are malfunctioning," Dr. Zrix announced, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. "We need to get them out of there." Timothy glanced at Tina, startled to see her bioluminescent glow pulsating more intensely than ever. The blue light emanating from her skin throbbed in sync with her quickened breathing, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. "Tina, are you okay?" Timothy asked, concern etched on his face. She nodded, her violet eyes wide with a mix of fear and grit. "I'm fine, but we need to get out of here." Timothy's diplomatic instincts kicked in. He spotted a communication panel near the chamber's entrance and made a dash for it, ducking as a makeshift projectile whizzed past his head. His fingers flew across the unfamiliar alien interface, establishing a link with the facility's central control room. "This is Timothy Simpson," he shouted into the comm. "We're trapped in the quarantine chamber. The environmental controls are failing. We need emergency override, now." A tense moment passed before a response crackled through. "Override initiated. Stand by for manual release." The chamber's door hissed open, and Timothy and Tina stumbled out, gasping in the cooler air of the corridor. They found themselves in the midst of a battlefield. Yadarin security forces clashed with Korra's followers, their alien appendages locked in combat. Through the chaos, Timothy spotted Dr. Zrix desperately trying to reach a nearby lab. "The research data," the scientist called out. "We can't let them get it." Without hesitation, Timothy grabbed Tina's hand. "Come on, we need to help him." They weaved through the melee, narrowly avoiding blows and energy blasts. As they approached the lab, they saw a group of Korra's followers attempting to breach the door. Tina's eyes narrowed, her body tensing. "I have an idea," she said, her voice low. "Follow my lead." With a burst of speed that left Timothy astonished, Tina charged towards the attackers. Her enhanced strength allowed her to effortlessly lift and throw a nearby piece of equipment, creating a thunderous distraction. The radicals turned, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected assault. Timothy seized the opportunity, using his smaller human frame to slip past the group and key open the lab door. Dr. Zrix rushed inside, his tentacles a blur as he worked to secure his research data. "How much time do you need?" Timothy called out, watching anxiously as Tina continued to outmaneuver their attackers with her newfound abilities. "Just a few more moments," Dr. Zrix replied, his eyes fixed on the data transfer progress bar. As the last of the data was secured and the physical evidence destroyed, a new commotion drew their attention. Commander Hayes, leading a mixed team of human and Yadarin security forces, fought his way towards them. "Simpson, we need to move, now!" Hayes shouted, his uniform singed and torn from the ongoing battle. As they regrouped and began to make their way through the facility, Timothy noticed an unmarked door slightly ajar. Curiosity piqued, he peered inside, his eyes widening at the sight of ancient artifacts and documents. "Wait," he called to the others. "Look at this!" They crowded into what appeared to be a secret Yadarin archive room. Dr. Zrix's multifaceted eyes darted from artifact to artifact, his tentacles trembling with excitement. "Impossible," he breathed. "These texts, they speak of an ancient connection between our species. This changes everything." Before they could fully process the implications of this discovery, a familiar voice rang out behind them. "Step away from the artifacts, human." They turned to find Korra and her inner circle blocking their exit, weapons trained on the group. The fanatical leader's eyes burned with hatred as she fixed her gaze on Timothy. Hand over the human and the research data, Cora demanded, her voice quivering with almost unchecked rage. We will not allow our species to be corrupted. A tense silence fell over the room as both sides assessed their options. Timothy's mind raced, searching for a diplomatic solution to defuse the volatile situation. Suddenly, Tina stepped forward, her body now emitting a brilliant blue glow that illuminated the entire room. All eyes turned to her as she addressed Cora and her followers. Listen to me, Tina began, her voice steady and clear. What we've discovered here today isn't a threat to our species. It's a chance to understand our shared history, to grow stronger together. As Tina continued her impassioned plea, Timothy noticed a flicker of uncertainty cross Cora's face. The radicals' weapons lowered slightly as they listened, captivated by Tina's transformation and her words. In that moment of hesitation, Commander Hayes and his team sprang into action. With precision and speed, they disarmed and subdued Cora's inner circle. Cora herself, however, managed to slip away in the confusion, her final words echoing through the chamber. "This isn't over," she snarled as she disappeared down a corridor. "We will not rest until our species is purified." As the immediate threat subsided, Dr. Zurix approached Timothy and Tina, his expression grave. "The High Council has called an emergency session," he informed them. "They want to see all of us immediately." Timothy and Tina exchanged a look, their hands finding each other almost unconsciously. As they prepared to face the Yadarin High Council and the uncertain future that lay ahead, Timothy couldn't help but feel a mix of apprehension and excitement. Whatever came next, he knew that his accidental encounter with Tina had set in motion events that would reshape not just their lives, but potentially the entire galaxy. As they followed Commander Hayes and Dr. Zurix out of the archive room, Timothy squeezed Tina's hand, drawing strength from their newfound bond. The fate of human-Yadarin relations hung in the balance, and they were at the center of it all. With the weight of their discoveries and the eyes of the galaxy upon them, Timothy and Tina stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Yadarin High Council chambers, Timothy felt a growing sense of anticipation. The weight of their discoveries pressed heavily upon him, and he found himself grateful for Tina's steadying presence at his side. The council chamber was a vast circular room with tiered seating rising high above them. Hundreds of Yadarin eyes focused on Timothy and Tina as they entered, their hushed whispers filling the air with a soft susurration. Commander Hayes and Dr. Zurix followed close behind, their expressions tense with the gravity of the situation. As they took their places before the council, the head counselor, a wizened Yadarin with deep violet skin, raised a tentacle for silence. The room fell still. "Timothy Simpson, Tina Vexilor," the counselor's voice resonated through the chamber. "You stand before us at a pivotal moment in our shared history. The evidence presented by Dr. Zurix, coupled with the unique developments in Tina's physiology, have led us to a decision that will shape the future of both our species." Timothy's heart raced as he awaited the council's verdict. He felt Tina's hand tighten around his own, her bioluminescent glow pulsing with increased intensity. The head counselor continued, "We propose a controlled human Yadarin breeding program to further explore the potential benefits of our genetic compatibility." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Timothy blinked, momentarily stunned by the announcement. He glanced at Tina, whose violet eyes were wide with surprise. "Furthermore," the counselor added, "given your unique positions in this unprecedented situation, we appoint you, Timothy Simpson, as the human liaison for this program, and you, Tina Vexilor, will serve as the Yadarin representative." As the implications of their new roles sank in, Timothy felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He and Tina would be at the forefront of a program that could reshape the galaxy. In the days that followed, Timothy and Tina found themselves thrust into a whirlwind of activity. They worked tirelessly to establish protocols for the breeding program, carefully selecting volunteers from both species. The weight of their responsibility was immense, and Timothy often found himself seeking solace in Tina's company during their rare moments of respite. One evening, as they reviewed applications in their shared office, Timothy noticed Tina's glow flickering with an unusual pattern. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Tina looked up, her violet eyes meeting his. "I'm fine, just overwhelmed. This program, it's going to change everything, isn't it?" Timothy nodded, moving to her side. "It is, but we're in this together." As he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, he felt a jolt of electricity pass between them. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the rest of the galaxy seemed to fade away. Timothy leaned in, drawn by an irresistible force, and their lips met in a passionate kiss. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. They sprang apart as Commander Hayes entered, his face set in grim lines. "Simpson, we need to talk," Hayes said, his tone brooking no argument. "I've received new orders from Earth. They want me to monitor the situation closely, particularly any potential military applications of this genetic compatibility." Timothy frowned, sensing the implications. "Commander, this program is about fostering understanding and cooperation between our species, not weaponizing it." Hayes's expression remained impassive. "That may be your perspective, Simpson, but Earth wants to be prepared for all contingencies." As Hayes left, Timothy turned to Tina, seeing his own concerns mirrored in her eyes. The complexities of their situation were multiplying rapidly. The first wave of human Yateran couplings yielded unexpected results. Some Yateran participants began exhibiting enhanced abilities similar to Tina's, while others showed no changes at all. This inconsistency puzzled Dr. Zurix and his team, leading them to hypothesize that certain genetic markers might be responsible for the compatibility. As Timothy and Tina pored over the data with Dr. Zurix, they were interrupted by urgent news. Cora, the escaped Yateran extremist, had resurfaced with a growing following. She had launched a propaganda campaign against the breeding program, claiming it would lead to the extinction of pure Yaterans. "This is getting out of hand," Timothy muttered, watching footage of protests erupting across Yateran cities. "We need to address these concerns before things escalate further." Tina nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing with worry. "Perhaps we should make a public statement, explain the benefits we've already seen from the program." Before they could formulate a plan, alarms blared throughout the facility. Security feeds showed a group of Cora's followers attempting to breach the perimeter. "We need to secure the research data," Dr. Zurix said, his tentacles flying over his console. As chaos erupted around them, Timothy felt Tina's hand slip into his. They exchanged a determined look, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The fate of human-Yateran relations hung in the balance, and they were at the center of it all. As Timothy and Tina braced themselves for another confrontation, a sharp pain shot through Tina's abdomen, causing her to double over. "Tina!" Timothy exclaimed, catching her as she stumbled. Her bioluminescence flared erratically, casting pulsating shadows across the room. Dr. Zurix rushed to their side, his tentacles expertly manipulating a handheld scanner. "Fascinating," he murmured, his multifaceted eyes widening. "It appears Tina is pregnant." The revelation hit Timothy like a shockwave. He stared at Tina, who looked equally stunned. Before they could process this information, alarms blared throughout the facility. "We need to move," Commander Hayes ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The High Council is calling an emergency session, and they want you two there immediately." As they hurried through the corridors, Timothy supported Tina, who was still unsteady on her feet. Security personnel formed a protective ring around them, their weapons at the ready. Upon reaching the council chambers, they found the room in an uproar. The head counselors struggled to maintain order as various factions argued vehemently. "Silence!" the counselor's voice boomed, finally quelling the din. "Timothy Simpson, Tina Vexler, step forward." As they approached the center of the chamber, Timothy felt the weight of countless eyes upon them. The head counselor's gaze was stern as he addressed them. "Given the unprecedented nature of this development," he began, choosing his words carefully, "we have no choice but to place you under protective custody. You will be transferred to a secure medical facility on our homeworld for observation and study." Timothy opened his mouth to protest, but a gentle squeeze from Tina's hand stopped him. He realized the gravity of their situation. Their child would be the first human-Yateran hybrid in history. Within hours, they found themselves in a state-of-the-art medical complex. Dr. Zurix, leading a mixed team of human and Yadaran scientists, began a battery of tests and scans. Remarkable, Dr. Zurix muttered as he examined the results. The fetus is developing at an accelerated rate. Its genetic structure is unlike anything we've ever seen. Days turned into weeks, and Timothy and Tina settled into a routine of constant monitoring and tests. Despite the clinical setting, their relationship deepened. They spent hours discussing their future and the implications of their child's existence. One morning, as Timothy awoke, he found Tina standing by the window, her entire body glowing with an intense blue light that seemed to penetrate the very walls. "Tina!" he called out, concern lacing his voice. She turned to him, her violet eyes wide with wonder. "I can feel it, Timothy. Our child. It's changing us." Before Timothy could respond, Dr. Zrix burst into the room, his tentacles waving excitedly. "You need to see this," he said, activating a holographic display. The image showed a three-dimensional rendering of Tina's womb. Within it, the fetus pulsed with energy, sending out waves that seemed to ripple through Tina's body and even extend beyond. "These energy pulses," Dr. Zurix explained, "they're activating dormant genes in both of you. Your physiologies are adapting, possibly to better support the hybrid child." As they absorbed this information, a commotion outside caught their attention. Through the window, they could see protesters gathering, their signs bearing slogans both for and against the Human-Yadaran Alliance. "The news of your pregnancy has spread," Commander Hayes said, entering the room. "Reactions are mixed, to say the least. Earth is demanding your immediate return, Timothy. They're citing potential biological threats." Timothy felt a surge of anger. "This child is not a threat," he said firmly. "It's a symbol of unity between our species." Hayes nodded grimly. "I agree, but not everyone shares that view. Korra's followers have launched attacks on human embassies and Yadaran government buildings. The military's implementing strict security measures across the planet." As if to emphasize his point, a distant explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared, and security personnel rushed past their room. "We need to move you to a more secure location," Hayes ordered, ushering them towards the door. As they hurried through the corridors, Timothy suddenly stumbled, a strange sensation flooding his mind. He could feel Tina's fear, her concern for their child, but the emotions weren't his own. "Tina," he gasped, I can sense your thoughts." She stared at him, her bioluminescence pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. "I can feel you too," she whispered. Their moment of connection was shattered as another explosion, much closer this time, shook the building. Debris rained down from the ceiling, and smoke began to fill the air. Through the chaos, Timothy spotted a group of figures moving towards them. They were unlike any aliens he had ever seen, their bodies seeming to shift and blur as they moved. With impossible speed and precision, they incapacitated the security forces. As the mysterious beings approached, Timothy pulled Tina close, their unborn child a spark of warmth between them. Whatever these aliens wanted, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The fate of their child, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Balance hung in the balance. As Timothy tightened his grip on Tina, ready to defend her and their unborn child, the mysterious figures emerged from the smoke-filled corridor. Their forms seemed to ripple and shift, defying the laws of physics. With inhuman speed and precision, they incapacitated the remaining security forces before Timothy could even blink. He felt Tina's bioluminescence pulse rapidly against his skin, her fear palpable. "What are they?" Tina whispered, her voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. Before Timothy could respond, one of the beings stepped forward, its body solidifying into a more recognizable form. It stood taller than any human or Yadaran, with iridescent skin that shimmered like starlight. "We are the Zephyrians," the being announced, its voice resonating in Timothy's mind rather than his ears. "We have come for the child." Commander Hayes raised his weapon, but with a mere gesture the Zephyrian sent it clattering to the floor. "Your primitive technology is no match for us," the alien stated calmly. Dr. Zurix, who had been quietly observing, suddenly sprang into action, His tentacles flew across a hidden panel in the wall, activating a device that emitted a high-pitched whine. The Zephyrians recoiled, their forms flickering wildly. "Run!" Dr. Zrix shouted, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "This will only hold them for moments." Timothy didn't need to be told twice. Supporting Tina, he dashed down the corridor, following Commander Hayes and Dr. Zrix. Behind them, they could hear the Zephyrians recovering, their footsteps echoing ominously. As they rounded a corner, Timothy felt a strange sensation wash over him. His mind expanded, suddenly aware of the complex systems around him. Without thinking, he reached out mentally, interfacing with the facility's security protocols. "Timothy, what are you doing?" Tina gasped as blast doors slammed shut behind them, momentarily halting their pursuers. I don't know," he panted, marveling at his newfound ability. "I can feel the technology around us. It's like an extension of my body." Their reprieve was short-lived. The Zephyrians phased through the blast doors as if they were mist, their forms solidifying as they advanced. Timothy prepared to defend Tina, but a searing pain tore through her abdomen, causing her to cry out. "The baby!" she gasped, doubling over. Her body began to emit pulses of intense energy, each wave causing the facility's lights to flicker and equipment to malfunction. Dr. Zrix's eyes widened in alarm. "The stress has accelerated the pregnancy. If we don't contain those energy pulses, they could destabilize the planet's core." As if on cue, the entire building shook violently. Cracks appeared in the walls, and the floor beneath them buckled. Timothy could feel the planet's very foundations trembling through his new connection to the facility's systems. Commander Hayes barked orders into his communicator, calling for a joint human-Yataran rescue operation. "We need to get them out of here now," he shouted over the cacophony of alarms and crumbling infrastructure. Timothy, acting on instinct, reached out with his mind once more. He envisioned a protective barrier around Tina, willing it into existence. To his amazement, a shimmering field of energy materialized, encasing her in a cocoon of safety. The energy pulses emanating from Tina's body collided with the barrier, contained within its confines. The facility's system stabilized, but Timothy felt the strain of maintaining the field. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he poured every ounce of his concentration into protecting Tina and their child. Just as it seemed they might have a moment to catch their breath, a new threat emerged. Cora, the Yataran extremist, burst into the corridor with a group of heavily armed followers. "The abomination must not be allowed to live," she snarled, her eyes wild with fanaticism. "It will be the end of pure Yataran blood." The medical facility erupted into chaos as three factions collided. The Zephyrians pressed forward, their advanced technology giving them an edge. Cora's extremists opened fire indiscriminately, their shots ricocheting off walls and equipment, and caught in the middle were Timothy, Tina, and their protectors, fighting desperately to survive. Dr. Zrix, displaying unexpected agility, darted between combatants, guiding Timothy and Tina towards a more secure area of the facility. Commander Hayes and a squad of mixed human and Yataran soldiers provided covering fire, holding back both Zephyrians and extremists. As they reached a makeshift medical bay, Tina let out an agonized scream. "It's coming!" she cried, her bioluminescence flaring so brightly it was almost blinding. Dr. Zrix immediately began preparing for the delivery, his tentacles a blur of motion as he gathered supplies. "Timothy, you must maintain that barrier," he instructed firmly. "It's the only thing preventing a planetary catastrophe." Timothy nodded grimly, his entire body trembling with the effort of sustaining the protective field. He could feel his strength waning, but the thought of Tina and their child in danger spurred him on. Outside the makeshift medical bay, the battle raged. The air crackled with energy weapons and the clash of advanced technologies. Through his connection to the facility's systems, Timothy could sense the ebb and flow of the conflict, each side vying for supremacy. As Tina's labor intensified, her cries of pain mingling with the sounds of combat, Timothy felt a surge of tenacity. Whatever the cost, he would protect his family and their future. The fate of not just their child, but possibly the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As the chaos reached its zenith, a blinding flash of light erupted from within Tina's protective barrier. The combatants froze, their weapons lowering as they shielded their eyes. When the light faded, a newborn's cry pierced the silence. Timothy's barrier flickered and dissipated as he collapsed to his knees, exhausted. Dr. Zrix cradled a small, luminescent form in his tentacles. "She's here," he announced, his voice filled with wonder. The Zephyrians, Korra's extremists, and the defenders all stood transfixed as the infant's glow pulsed, sending waves of energy rippling through the room. Equipment sparked and sputtered, then inexplicably repaired itself. The wounded found their injuries healing at an accelerated rate. Commander Hayes was the first to break the spell. "We need to move now," he barked, snapping everyone back to reality. As if on cue, the facility shuddered violently. Through his connection to the building systems, Timothy sensed the planet's core destabilizing. "The baby's energy output," he gasped. "It's affecting the planet." Dr. Zrix quickly wrapped the infant in a specialized containment blanket. "This should dampen the energy emissions temporarily," he explained, handing the child to Tina. The new parents shared a brief, awe-filled glance before reality intruded once more. Korra, her expression a mix of fear and fascination, lowered her weapon. What is happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, a Zephyrian stepped forward. "The child must come with us," it stated, its form shimmering with awe-inspiring power. "Only we can control her abilities." "No one's taking our daughter," Timothy growled, positioning himself protectively in front of Tina and the baby. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the tension. "Stand down, all of you." General Vex strode into the room, flanked by a contingent of Galactic Council peacekeepers. "By order of the Council, this planet is now under a galactic quarantine. No one enters or leaves without authorization." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Timothy, Tina, and their newborn daughter, whom they named Nova, were whisked away to a specially designed facility on the outskirts of the capital. The structure gleamed with a mix of human, Yadaran, and Zephyrian technology, designed to contain and study Nova's unique energy emissions. As they settled into their new quarters, Dr. Zurix busied himself with a battery of tests and scans. "Fascinating," he murmured, his eyes fixed on a holographic display of Nova's DNA. "Her genetic structure is stabilizing, incorporating beneficial traits from all three species." Timothy watched in amazement as Nova, despite being only hours old, focused her gaze on the scientist with startling clarity. "Is that normal?" he asked hesitantly. Dr. Zrix shook his head. "Nothing about this situation is normal, Timothy. Your daughter is evolving at an unprecedented rate, and that's not all." He turned to face the new parents. "Both of you are showing signs of genetic alteration as well." Tina gasped, her bioluminescence flickering with surprise. "What do you mean?" Before Dr. Zrix could elaborate, Commander Hayes entered the room, accompanied by a tall, ethereal Zephyrian. "This is Zara," Hayes introduced. "She's here as a representative of the Zephyrian High Council." Zara inclined her head gracefully. "We have much to discuss," she said, her voice resonating in their minds. "Your child's birth has set in motion events long foretold in our ancient records." As Zara spoke, Timothy felt a strange sensation wash over him. His awareness expanded, and he found himself able to perceive the intricate web of energy flowing through the facility. He reached out instinctively, manipulating the security systems with a mere thought. Tina, observing his actions, suddenly realized she could sense the emotions of everyone in the room. "Timothy," she whispered, "I think I'm becoming empathic." Zara nodded solemnly. The child's presence is awakening dormant abilities in those around her. This is only the beginning. Outside the facility, news of Nova's birth spread rapidly across the galaxy. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, broadcasting their deliberations to trillions of beings on countless worlds. "We stand at a crossroads," the Council President announced. "The union of human and Yadaran has produced a child of unprecedented potential. We must decide how to proceed." As the Council debated, protests erupted on numerous planets. Some hailed Nova as a symbol of unity, while others decried her as a threat to species purity. Religious leaders struggled to reconcile ancient doctrines with the reality of interspecies hybridization. Back in the secure facility, Timothy and Tina watched the galactic reaction with a mix of hope and trepidation. Nova, cradled in Tina's arms, seemed oblivious to the tumult her existence had caused. "What happens now?" Tina asked softly, her gaze fixed on their daughter's peaceful face. Timothy wrapped an arm around her shoulders, feeling the comforting pulse of her bioluminescence. "I don't know," he admitted, "but whatever comes, we'll face it together." As if in response to her father's words, Nova's eyes fluttered open. For a moment they glowed with an otherworldly light, and both Timothy and Tina felt a wave of pure love and reassurance wash over them. In that instant, they knew that their daughter's birth was just the first step on a journey that would reshape the very fabric of galactic society. The years that followed Nova's birth were a whirlwind of change and discovery. As the galaxy grappled with the implications of her existence, Timothy and Tina watched in awe as their daughter grew at an unprecedented rate. By the time Nova reached the equivalent of adolescence, barely 5 years had passed. On a crisp morning, as the family prepared for another day of tests and observation, alarms blared throughout the compound. Commander Hayes burst into their quarters, his face grim. "We're under attack," he announced, his voice tight with urgency. "The Purists have launched a coordinated assault on multiple fronts. They're targeting research facilities, diplomatic centers, and now us." Timothy's enhanced connection to the facility's systems immediately flooded his mind with information. He could sense the breach points, the number of attackers, and the strain on their defenses. "How did they get past our outer perimeter?" Tina asked, her bioluminescence pulsing with anxiety. "They've been planning this for years," General Vex's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've got Purist cells activating all over the planet. Our forces are spread thin." Nova, now resembling a teenager despite her young age, stood up, her eyes glowing with an inner light. "We need to help," she said, her voice carrying a strength beyond her years. As if in response to her words, the building shook violently. The sound of explosions and weapons fire filled the air. "Follow me," Commander Hayes ordered, leading them towards a secure bunker deep within the compound. They raced through corridors filled with panicked scientists and security personnel. Timothy used his abilities to seal off sections of the facility, buying them precious time. Tina's empathic powers allowed her to calm those they passed, preventing chaos from taking hold. As they reached the central atrium, a massive explosion rocked the building. The reinforced windows shattered, and Purist forces poured in, their weapons trained on the family. "Surrender the abomination!" a masked attacker demanded, pointing at Nova. In that moment, Nova's latent abilities fully awakened. Her eyes blazed with energy, and a shimmering field erupted from her body. It expanded rapidly, engulfing Timothy, Tina, and the entire security team. Weapons fire from the Purists dissipated harmlessly against the barrier. The attackers faltered, their purpose wavering in the face of Nova's raw power. Some lowered their weapons, struck by the awe-inspiring sight before them. Seizing the opportunity, Timothy reached out with his mind, interfacing with the Purists' advanced weaponry. With a thought, he disabled their guns, leaving them defenseless. Tina's bioluminescence flared brilliantly, emitting pulses of disorienting light. The Purists stumbled, their coordination shattered by the dazzling display. As the family worked in concert, Commander Hayes and his team pressed the advantage. They moved swiftly, subduing the confused attackers with practiced efficiency. "We need to get to Dr. Zrix's lab," Timothy shouted over the commotion. "He's been working on something that might end this once and for all." They fought their way through the compound, Nova's protective field expanding to shield more and more of the structure. As they neared the lab, they encountered an unexpected sight. Cora, once their fierce opponent, stood at the head of a group of armed Yatarans. "We're here to help," she called out, her expression a mix of tenacity and regret. "I was wrong about you, about all of this. We want to make amends." With Cora's group bolstering their numbers, they pushed back the remaining Purist forces. Finally, they reached Dr. Zrix's lab, finding the scientists frantically working amidst the chaos. "You're just in time," Dr. Zrix exclaimed, his tentacles flying over a complex array of equipment. "I've completed a device that can amplify Nova's energy signature. If we broadcast it planet-wide, it could trigger a mass activation of dormant genes in all 3 species. It might be our only chance to end this conflict." Timothy and Tina exchanged a worried glance. That would change everyone without their consent, Tina said, her voice heavy with concern. But it could save countless lives, Timothy countered, torn by the implications. As the adults debated, Nova stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the device. Without a word, she placed her hands on the machine, interfacing with it in a way that left even Dr. Zrick speechless. "What are you doing?" Timothy asked, sensing the surge of power through his connection to the lab's systems. Nova turned to her parents, her expression serene despite the chaos around them. "I'm changing its purpose," she explained. "Instead of forcing evolution, we'll share understanding." With that, she activated the device. A wave of energy pulsed outward, rippling through the compound and beyond. But instead of genetic change, it carried something far more profound. A psychic message of unity, straight from Nova's mind to every being on the planet. As the message spread, the sounds of battle outside the lab began to fade. Timothy and Tina watched in amazement as Nova stood at the center of it all, a bridge between worlds and species, showing everyone the potential of a united future. The purest attack faltered, then ceased entirely. Through the lab's windows, they could see former enemies lowering their weapons, overcome by the shared vision of harmony. As the dust settled and the immediate danger passed, Timothy pulled Tina and Nova into a tight embrace. They had survived not just this attack, but years of uncertainty and fear. And now, thanks to their daughter's incredible gift, they had given the entire planet a chance at a new beginning. "What happens now?" Tina asked softly, her bioluminescence pulsing with a mix of relief and anticipation. Timothy looked out at the scene of former enemies helping each other to their feet, of humans, Yadorans, and even a few Zephyrians beginning to communicate without hostility. "Now," he said, "we start building the future Nova showed us. Together." As if in response, Nova's eyes glowed once more, a smile playing on her lips. The message she had shared was just the beginning. The real work of uniting their world, and perhaps the galaxy, lay ahead. But for the first time, it felt truly possible.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.